for someone like Rishi Sunak, this will, of course, cause major problems and headaches within number 10. They see Boris Johnson, of course, as someone as a major disruptor, someone whose comments on major policy issues, whether it's been Brexit or whether it's been in the smoking ban recently, has, of course, caused major problems within number 10.
Keir Starmer says Labour will increase defence spending and keep the UK's nuclear deterrent. Questions continue over Angela Rayner's tax affairs. That story's not going anywhere. And Boris Johnson has refused to rule out a return to frontline politics. Let's find out more with Tom Scotson, political reporter for Politics Home. Morning, Tom.
Good morning.
Let's begin with the Labour leader. What has he been saying about his party's defence policy then?
So this came up in an interview with the Eye yesterday, and this is Keir Starmer's commitment for a future Labour government to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence spending. This is up from around 2.3% that is spent currently by the Conservative government. But also as well, he made these comments in lockstep with his party's commitment, his unshakable commitment, in his words, to quote him, to Britain's nuclear deterrent, which is a real move from the Labour Party from its position under Jeremy Corbyn in 2019, of course, where Jeremy Corbyn was very much against Britain's nuclear deterrent. He had spent his whole political career campaigning against Britain's nuclear capability and, of course, for nuclear disarmament. And I think it's a very big step for Keir Starmer. There's been many people that have been questioning what Labour's defence policy will be in office, how it will move on for defence policy. It's been a big area of questioning for the Conservative government at the moment, and many of their MPs and backbenchers have been criticising that the government is currently not spending enough. So for Keir Starmer now to come in and use this political space to show to the public who see this is probably one of their weakest elements to come in and say that it's unshakable commitment for Britain to maintain this nuclear deterrent, but also as well to raise defence spending, I think will be very welcome for his party, but also could potentially look at hoovering up even more voters who maybe voted for the Conservative Party in 2019, hated Jeremy Corbyn when he was Labour leader, but are now wavering, don't know who to vote for, and could be persuaded by Keir Starmer and his new look Labour Party.
It's also interesting that he's prepared to commit to a spending increase, because up until now he's been very, very cautious about Labour's spending plans. But I suppose defence maybe falls into a slightly different category given what we're seeing in Ukraine and the Middle East at the moment. I suppose, Tom, the response from the Conservatives inevitably will be to point out that Keir Starmer served in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet.
I mean, this is definitely going to be a criticism that Tory MPs and CCHQ are going to look at. Exactly. I mean, this is something that they have brought up before. I think it's something on the doorstep that hovers questions over Keir Starmer. I think people still remember that he is linked to Jeremy Corbyn, and Jeremy Corbyn was very disliked by many Tory 2019 voters. So from a CCHQ point of view, this is going to be something that could resonate with voters and hopefully bring at least some of them back in maybe marginal constituencies. But for particular wavering voters, those don't knows, those ones that Keir Starmer needs to bring back, maybe the patriotic ones that are located in the red wall seats that Keir Starmer will need to get a majority. There is in questions behind the scenes of this is going to be a very popular policy in those constituencies. This is a weak point for Labour. And if they can really show they are strong and united on this compared to the Conservatives who have been divided over a lot of the reporting that has been made over the last couple of weeks, then this is somewhere that it can make real headway.
Worth mentioning, just on the topic of Labour's defence policy, the Shadow Defence Minister Luke Pollard's going to be on Times Radio Breakfast with Chloe Tilley and Callum MacDonald this morning. They're on the way from 6. Let's come on to the story, Tom, that doesn't seem to be going away. Angela Rayner's tax affairs. More than a dozen of her former neighbours are yet to have been contacted by police, who are reviewing a decision not to investigate claims she broke electoral law. Obviously, she's the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and she was reported to Greater Manchester Police over allegations she gave false information about where she was living between 2010 and 2015. Now, Patrick Maguire has a comment piece in the Times today saying that Labour's stonewalling on this issue is starting to cloud their campaign and make it difficult for them to get their message through. I mean, for example, I'm sure Keir Starmer wants to be having a lot of coverage today on his defence announcements, but again, there are questions over Angela Rayner's tax affairs. Where do you see this story going?
I mean, it's an interesting one because the allegations came out in a Lord Ashcroft book that was published a fair few weeks ago. I remember going to the book launch, and the conversations, of course, were rolling on, and many of the jokes there at the launch were made, of course, about Angela Rayner's two homes and whether she paid capital gains tax on one of the homes when it was sold. Now, I think the interesting thing for this story is twofold. The first is that CCHQ clearly see it in their interest to keep going. Even though Angela Rayner is very popular with Labour voters, they see her as deeply unpopular and divisive with their own core voters, particularly the Tory 2019 voters that the Conservatives need to bring back. Now, the only way that I can see this continuing to have legs is that either Labour come forward now and have to say something that Angela Rayner has changed her position on this, or that the police do find that there was any wrongdoing. Now, I should stress that Angela Rayner has said that there has been no wrongdoing. She's sought legal advice. There was a lobby dinner that Angela Rayner did host many weeks ago that I was there, and she was very forthright in her, obviously, of course, comments and what she'd done, and really pushed back against allegations that she'd done anything wrong. It's going to be difficult for the Labour Party here because, of course, that they really want to get on a positive march for this local election campaign. It is in their deep interest to show that they are back electorally, and they have really pushed back the Conservatives. I would say, though, that even though this is definitely a hiccup in the road, and this is definitely frustrating a lot of Labour advisors at Labour HQ, it is still very unlikely that the Conservatives will regain ground. And according to many election experts, particularly those that I've spoken to this week, they see that whatever happens in May, it is going to be a disastrous result for the Conservative Party, who are likely to lose hundreds of council seats.
Well, and you wonder if it is a bad night for the Conservative Party in the local elections, whether there will be talk of a potential comeback for Boris Johnson, who was asked about this yesterday. What did he say, Tom?
So Boris Johnson was interviewed by a number of students in Washington, and there was talks about many parts of his career. There was, of course, Brexit, what he thought of Donald Trump, but of course, as you say there, whether he would become an MP again. Now, I think Boris Johnson innately would have loved this question, and he could kind of maybe compare in his head to his obviously Churchill, who came back as an MP five times for different constituencies. Now, Boris Johnson said in the short term this is very unlikely, but did not rule it out in the long term. Now, whether this is a feasible possibility, who knows? The only thing that will definitely really, of course, unlike for someone like Rishi Sunak, this will, of course, cause major problems and headaches within Number 10. They see Boris Johnson, of course, as someone as a major disruptor, someone whose comments on major policy issues, whether it's been Brexit or whether it's been in the smoking ban recently, has, of course, caused major problems within Number 10 and made things more difficult for them as ever. A former prime minister commenting on policy is never a good look for the government. So I think this is at the moment more about attention, but of course,
Mm.
Boris still has that magnetic pull with many Tory voters.
Tom, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Tom Scotson there, political reporter for Politics Home.